Hi, it's Ramsey Dewey at the JX Fight Club in Shanghai, China, and today we have an excellent question from our friend Edmund Nelson, who asks about combat Jiu-Jitsu. If you're not familiar with that, it's a sport, it's no-gi grappling, where they're allowed to strike with an open hand. And so if you watch these things, a lot of the times it looks like a lot of slapping on the ground, and if you're not familiar with what you're seeing, it might look kind of silly. I mean, I've found myself laughing at a few of these matches I've seen just because it looks like they're playing patty cake with each other's faces. But our friend asks, is this method of sparring a good training method to develop awareness for MMA? Since it seems like it's safer than throwing full punches and elbows and that sort of thing. And that's a good question. I've got some mixed feelings about this because striking with the palm can actually be quite dangerous if you know how to do it. Okay, if you look at, say, Keith Hackney in the early UFC when he fought Emmanuel Yarborough, the 800-pound sumo. Keith Hackney, the much smaller karate guy, started the match with a big overhand palm strike, which knocked down the 800-pound sumo. Okay, it was a very powerful strike. If you watch those early Pancrase fights where they were only allowed to strike with the open hand, a lot of people got knocked out. For example, if you watch Bas Rutten's early career, he knocked a lot of people out because he understood this is a bunch of bone attached to your wrists. If you frame your palm against your wrist and put your body weight behind that, punch into it with the same type of explosion you do with a fist, you can really hurt people. Now, I haven't really seen anybody in the Combat Jiu-Jitsu League who seems like they're particularly dangerous with the strikes. It seems to be more annoying than anything. And so what tends to happen is people get a position where they would be able to flow or whatever in a no-gi grappling match without strikes, but the strikes change the dynamic and cause them to cover up and give up positions they would not have otherwise. Okay, so in some ways it's, I would say there is some carryover to mixed martial arts, and this might be a good sport for people to get into who are interested in MMA but intimidated by elbows and kicks and the stand-up game and that sort of thing, to get their feet wet. Now, as far as training goes, here in my gym, as far as getting people used to the idea of grappling with striking, well, we actually put on the gloves and we hit each other. Now, it's light contact. It's very important we understand if you're in a bad position, if you're mounting your training partner, we're not going to rain down full contact barrages of strikes to TKO them. We're going to tap them and essentially let them know you need to move. Okay? So it's a matter of control in the gym. Now, I got a comment yesterday from somebody commented on a video I did about sparring where I said most of your sparring should be light contact and controlled. And I talked about how when I was younger, when I started out with professional fighting, I made the mistake of doing all my sparring full contact. And I ended up getting a lot of injuries and very little ring time. So again, it's very important to use control when we spar so that we can do more of it. If you watch fighters in Thailand, what do they do? Well, they fight once a week or once every 2 weeks, and they do that day after day, month after month, year after year, and so they rack up hundreds of fights by the time they're like 20 years old. But if you watch them in the gym, their sparring is very controlled, and they're taking measures to ensure that they don't get injured. Why? Because they have a fight that weekend. And, there's no reason to injure yourself in the gym in sparring. I mean, that's just stupid. So if you want a long career, it's very important to practice smart training principles. So is palm striking, is doing that in the gym a good training method? Well, if you use control, maybe, okay? But again, if you're trying to knock each other out with those, no. And you can't just assume that because you're hitting with an open hand that it's not going to do damage, whereas hitting with a closed hand is going to do damage. That's not how it works. I mean, I've done all kinds of brick breaking demos back in the day where I smashed stacks of bricks with an open palm. A lot of people have done that. I mean, look up like iron palm technique here on YouTube. You can see a lot of people who practice traditional martial arts, and they smash coconuts and bricks and all kinds of cool stuff like that with their palms. Especially if we're striking downward. Because when we strike downward, we can put our body weight into it. We can fall into it and increase the amount of damage that we do. And in combat Jiu-Jitsu, those palm strikes are almost always coming downward. So again, if these guys in combat Jiu-Jitsu really knew how to capitalize on palm striking, they could do some serious damage. Now, you are correct. It is not anywhere nearly as bad as an elbow, because this is a sharp hook right there. It's bone. I mean, look at that thing. They're like little hooks that pop out of the elbows. I mean, and that's bone-on-bone contact. Elbows will open up cuts. And the same way headbutts will open up cuts, because it's bone-on-bone contact with a thin layer of skin in between. So in that regard, yeah, palm striking, much safer to do in sparring than striking with the elbow. But at the same time, here's my second concern about the palm strikes for sparring in the gym. These fingers, okay? One of the biggest nuisances in the sport of mixed martial arts is eye gouging. Back in May, last May, they passed a new rule in the UFC that you are no longer allowed to point your fingers toward your opponent's eyes. So if you're standing up, this is now illegal. You've got to point your fingers away or close your hands or just do something where they're not pointing toward the other guy, because there were way too many fighters getting poked in the eye. And that is a risk to your training partner. If you've got open hands and you're striking, those fingers are likely to find their way into the eyes at some point. So as far as safety, for MMA sparring, I'd recommend get the big sparring gloves, you know, the ones with the open hand but a little extra padding over the top, and use light contact strikes. Okay? Now, there are certain situations where I actually do use palm strikes for MMA sparring, but not the way that you might think, not necessarily to do damage. For example, if somebody you're going for an armbar, you're on top, you're in that spiderweb position, and they're locking up their hands, you can actually use the palm strike against their hand to break their grip. It's a really easy way to break a grip, and it shocks a lot of people, because most people don't think of using a palm strike in Jiu-Jitsu, and so they use all these pressure and leverage methods to open it up, besides just hit that hand right off. Okay, another great palm striking method, if you're in the guard on the bottom, you're getting squished, and you don't really have leverage or space to do anything, palm strike the ear. Why? Because that pushes air into the head. I mean, it hurts. So, and even if you develop your palm striking ability, even at short range with a quick thrust, you can do quite a bit of damage to the floating ribs. Okay, if you are able to explode your body in a spiraling fashion. Okay, even from the bottom of the guard, you can do that sort of thing. But another reason people are a little reluctant, and one reason I am sometimes reluctant to teach palm striking in mixed martial arts, is because it looks a little bit like tapping out. I had a fight against a guy named Mike Bullock years ago, and he's a good fighter. A lot of respect to him. And if you look up my Sherdog record, it says that Mike won the fight with an armbar, and that is not actually true. In the middle of the first round, we ended up on the ground, and we were kind of tumbling around. We ended up in a weird human pretzel type of position. He had kind of a goofy leg scissors on, and I was like halfway on my back trying to get up, and I heard my cornerman call out, "Reach up and grab his leg and just get on top." So what happened? I reached up, and my hand slapped on his leg like that, and the referee saw this as a tap. Now again, it only happened once, but he ran in, he erred on the side of caution, which is what referees are supposed to do, and he stopped the fight. I remember thinking like, oh man, and you know, it is what it is. I accept that loss. I mean, I was on the losing side of that fight beforehand, so, you know, props to him, Mike won that fight. But one lesson I learned is if we do something that looks like a tap in a fight, it is very likely that the referee is going to stop the fight. So again, palm striking, be careful how and where and why you do that in an MMA fight.
Now, here is where MMA strategy diverges radically from combat jiu-jitsu strategy. Notice how the standing fighter is leaning forward over his opponent. You cannot get away with this in mixed martial arts. You will get upkicked and knocked out. But the more I watched combat jiu-jitsu, I noticed this was the norm. They would lean forward, trying to get that slap in. But watch what happens when you do that in MMA. Again, when you're the standing fighter fighting somebody in the open guard, you should lean your head back, get it as far away from that foot as you can. If you were leaning forward, again, you are feeding your opponent your head on a silver platter. And not just the head, I've seen liver shot knockouts as well from up kicks with the heels. But a lot of times people get greedy because they're on top and they try to drive straight through the center line. They try to phase through solid matter. In other words, the legs, instead of going around them or through them or over or under, whatever. Right? But if we are leaning forward with broken posture in front of a fighter playing open guard, we are running a huge risk of getting upkicked. And again, this is something I see constantly in combat jiu-jitsu. Don't do it, guys.
I think I touched on all the bases there. So again, if you want to spar in the gym in a safe way, put some bigger gloves on, use light contact striking, use a lot of control. I wouldn't necessarily recommend the palm strikes unless you just don't have gloves, and if so, be very, very careful not to poke your partners in the eyes. If you like combat jiu-jitsu, if you're excited about that, great, go do it. Because one thing that's great about martial arts is that not all martial arts need to lead to the cage. Not all martial arts need to lead to an MMA career. Like seriously, if you like Tai Chi as an exercise, if you like cutting invisible watermelons in half in the park with a bunch of old people, and that's all you like to do and that's all you ever want to do, great, do that. If that motivates you to get off your butt and move, awesome. If you like practicing Aikido and you have no intention of ever using that in a real fight, awesome. Okay, if you like dressing up like a ninja and playing with swords, cool, more power to you. And if you want to train for mixed martial arts, well, hey, as I always say, thanks for watching. Now get out there and train.